Imagine this. You're on a mountaintop, and suddenly there's this blinding divine light, a moment so overwhelming it just scrambles everything.
Yeah, pure glory.
And then, boom, you come down straight into, well, desperate suffering, confusion, and this really frustrating failure.
That contrast, that whiplash, really sets the scene for what we're diving into today.
We're plunging into one single chapter of the Bible, Mark chapter 9, and it is absolutely packed.
It really is, just full of dramatic events, profound teachings, a real roller coaster.
So our mission here really is to navigate this dense landscape. We want to pull out the key moments, those nuggets of insight.
And help you see what the core messages are and maybe why they, still matter so much today.
Okay then, let's unpack Mark 9.
So it kicks off with something pretty extraordinary, a real high point, you could say, literally.
Right. Jesus takes 3 of his inner circle, Peter, James, and John, up a high mountain alone.
And Mark notes it's after 6 days. It's one of those details that makes you pause, makes you wonder what that implies.
Definitely. And what happens up there is, well, astonishing. It's the transfiguration.
Jesus is just transformed.
Yeah.
There. His clothes become dazzling white, like intensely white.
Mark even adds whiter than anyone on earth could possibly bleach them. Like the veil is pulled back, They see his divine glory.
And it's not just Jesus changing. Suddenly, 2 immense figures from Israel's history are there with him.
Moses and Elijah.
Exactly. Moses representing the law and Elijah, the prophets. Standing there talking with Jesus. It's deeply symbolic.
It really affirms Jesus' place, his authority within God's whole plan.
And Peter reacts. He's caught up in it, maybe totally overwhelmed.
He just blurts out, "Rabbi, it's good we're here. Let's put up 3 shelters. One for Jesus, one for Moses, one for Elijah."
But then Mark gives us that fascinating little aside, doesn't he?
He does. He did not know what to say. They were so frightened. It really humanizes it, that sense of panic and confusion.
Absolutely. And the divine affirmation isn't over. A cloud descends, envelops them.
A classic Old Testament sign of God's presence, right?
Exactly. And then a voice from the cloud, God the Father. It echoes Jesus' baptism.
"This is my son, whom I love. Listen to him."
Listen to him. It's a direct command. It places Jesus' authority even above Moses and Elijah. Confirms who he is.
And then, just like that, they're gone. Moses and Elijah vanish.
When the disciples look up, it's just Jesus again. The glory fades, leaving them with this command and, well, a lot to process.
So as they're coming down the mountain, Jesus gives them this really strict instruction.
Yeah, don't tell anyone what you've seen.
Until the Son of Man has risen from the dead.
And that phrase itself just throws them. You can feel the confusion.
The text says they kept it quiet, but they couldn't stop talking amongst themselves, trying to figure out what rising from the dead could possibly mean.
It's clearly a concept that's just not clicking for them yet. It's alien.
And it leads them to ask about something else they'd heard.
Right. They bring up what the scribes teach, that Elijah has to come first.
This confirms it. He says, yes, Elijah comes first, restores things, but then he pivots.
He asks essentially, okay, but why then does Scripture say the Son of Man must suffer so much and be rejected?
And then he connects the dots, or hints at it. He says, Elijah has come, and they did to him whatever they pleased, just as it's written.
It really sounds like he's pointing to John the Baptist, doesn't it? That John was the Elijah figure and he suffered.
Subtly foreshadowing his own suffering. That's also written about, yeah.
That link between Elijah's fate and the Son of Man's fate is crucial. So this incredible mountaintop high
is immediately followed by mystery, misunderstanding, questions about Jesus' future.
And that transition sets up the next scene perfectly. Down from the glory, right into the chaos below.
It's jarring. They rejoin the other 9 disciples.
Only to find them in the middle of this big crowd, arguing with some teachers of the law. A tense situation.
You have to wonder what the 9 had been trying and failing to do while the others were away.
And notice the crowd's reaction when Jesus appears. They're overwhelmed with wonder. They run to greet him. His presence just changes the atmosphere.
Yeah. He cuts right to it, asks, "What's the argument about?"
And a man steps out from the crowd. You can just feel his desperation. He describes his son.
Possessed by a spirit that makes him mute, throws him down violently, foaming at the mouth, grinding his teeth, becoming rigid. It sounds horrific.
And then the core issue comes out. I asked your disciples to drive it out, the father says, but they could not.
Oof. The 9 disciples, the ones who'd been given authority earlier, they failed here.
And this failure, plus the argument, seems to prompt this strong, almost weary reaction from Jesus.
He looks the whole scene, calls them an unbelieving generation, and asks, "How long do I have to stay with you? How long must I put up with you? Then bring the boy to me.
And the moment a spirit sees Jesus, it reacts violently, throws the boy into another convulsion right there.
It's a visceral, awful picture of this spiritual battle playing out.
But Jesus doesn't just jump to the healing. He talks to the father first, asks how long this has been happening.
Since childhood, the father says. And he adds that the spirit often tries to kill the boy, throwing him into fire or water. Just constant danger.
Then comes that raw plea, filled with doubt from past experiences probably. But if you can do anything, take pity on us and help us.
That if you can, it hangs there. And Jesus picks up on it immediately.
He challenges it, turns the focus right back onto the Father's faith. If you can, Jesus echoes. Then the statement, everything is possible for one who believes.
Powerful. And A leads to maybe one of the most relatable cries in the whole Bible.
Absolutely. The Father just blurts out instantly, I do believe, help me overcome my unbelief.
It's so honest. Faith mixed with doubt. Believing despite the struggle.
It shows faith isn't about having zero doubts, right? It's about choosing to trust even when it's hard.
Exactly. So Jesus sees the crowd rushing in, maybe wanting to avoid a spectacle.
He acts decisively then, rebukes the spirit. You deaf and mute spirit, commands it out. Never enter him again.
And the text says the spirit shrieks, convulses the boy violently one last time, and leaves.
The boy is left looking so still, like a corpse. People are saying he's dead.
But Jesus just takes his hand, lifts him up, and the boy stands. It's an incredible display of power.
Power over spiritual darkness. Power that looks like power over death itself.
Later, though, when they're inside, away from everyone, the disciples have a question.
The obvious one. Why couldn't we do it? They had the authority, they thought. Why did it fail this time?
And Jesus gives a very specific, intriguing answer.
He says this kind can come out only by prayer. Some manuscripts add, and fasting, but the core is prayer.
Suggesting some spiritual challenges need more than just delegated authority. They require, what, a deeper connection.
A deeper dependence on God, maybe cultivated through prayer. Yeah, that seems to be the implication.
So that whole episode just unpacks so much about faith, doubt, Jesus' power, spiritual reality, the need for prayer. Phew.
And it flows right into the next section. They leave that area, travel through Galilee. Mark says Jesus wanted to keep it quiet.
And he tells us why directly. Because he was teaching his disciples. These were private, important lessons.
So what was the core teaching? Again, it's his own difficult future. He lays it out plainly.
The Son of Man is going to be betrayed into human hands. They will kill him, and after 3 days he will rise.
This is the second time Mark records him spelling this out. Suffering, death, resurrection.
And the disciples' reaction? Exactly the same as before.
They did not understand what he meant and were afraid to ask him about it, still baffled, still maybe scared of the answer.
The idea of a suffering Messiah, let alone a resurrected one, just doesn't compute with their expectations yet.
So they get to Capernaum, go into a house, and Jesus knows something's been up. He asks them straight, what were you arguing about on the road?
Silence. The text says they kept quiet because, well, they were embarrassed.
Because they'd been arguing about who was the greatest.
Wow. Right after Jesus predicts his betrayal and death, and right after their own failure, their focus on status, the contrast is stark.
Jesus uses it as a teaching moment, though. A radical one. He sits down, calls the 12 over.
And he completely flips the script on greatness. If anyone wants to be first, he says,
he must be the very last and the servant of all. Leadership isn't about power over others. It's about humble service.
And then he gives them this incredibly powerful visual. He takes a little child.
Has the child stand right there among them. And then, with such tenderness, Mark says he takes the child into his arms.
And the teaching connects welcoming this child, someone with zero status in that society, to welcoming Jesus himself.
And welcoming Jesus means welcoming the one who sent him, God. Whoever welcomes one of these little children in my name welcomes me.
And whoever welcomes me does not welcome me, but the one who sent me. It completely redefines value. It's not about status. It's about intrinsic worth, seen in how you treat the least powerful.
Such a challenge to their and our ideas about importance.
So in this part, we see them wrestling with suffering, clinging to status, and Jesus just cutting through it all with this call to humility and service centered on the most vulnerable.
But while they're still in the house, another issue pops up. It reveals their us versus them thinking again.
Right. This time it's John who speaks up. He says basically, "Teacher, We saw this guy driving out demons in your name.
And we told him to stop because he wasn't one of us. He wasn't part of their group.
Highlights that narrow insider mentality they had.
But Jesus' response is, well, surprisingly broad, inclusive. He says, do not stop him.
His reasoning. Anyone doing a miracle in his name isn't likely to turn around and speak evil of him right away.
And then the principle, whoever is not against us is for us.
Alignment with his work matters more than formal group membership, it seems.
He even reinforces this by promising a reward for the smallest act of kindness done out of allegiance to him.
Yeah, just giving a cup of water because someone belongs to Christ, even that
Yeah.
simple act will certainly not lose its reward. It is values, motive, and belonging to him. But then the teaching takes a sharp turn, doesn't it? Gets really serious.
Very serious. Warnings about causing one of these little ones who believe to sin. That phrase likely means new believers, or maybe just vulnerable followers.
And the warning is graphic. Jesus says it would be better to have a giant millstone tied around your neck and be thrown into the sea than to cause one of them to stumble spiritually.
It shows just how seriously he takes influencing others, especially those who are vulnerable in their faith. The harm is depicted as immense.
And right after that, he turns to warnings about personal sin. And these are extreme.
Almost hyper-literal imagery. If your hand causes you to sin, cut it off. Your foot, cut it off. Your eye, pluck it out.
The point being, it's better to enter life or the kingdom of God physically impaired, maimed, crippled, one-eyed, than to be whole and end up in hell.
And his description of hell is equally stark. He draws on Isaiah, where the fire never goes out, and their worm does not die, and the fire is not quenched.
These are incredibly strong warnings about the reality and the eternal consequences of persistent, unrepented sin. Radical action is needed to deal with it.
After those intense warnings, the chapter ends with a couple of really enigmatic sayings. First, everyone will be salted with fire.
Salted with fire. What does that mean? It's cryptic.
It really is. And then he immediately talks about salt itself. Salt is good, he says, but if it loses its saltiness, how can you make it salty again? Useless.
And the final command in the chapter brings it right back to their relationships. Have salt in yourselves and be at peace with each other.
So this last section gives us this broad view on who's in, the gravity of leading others astray, the need for radical personal purity, and these mysterious images of fire, salt, and peace.
What a chapter. Honestly, it's a real journey, isn't it?
It really is. You go from that peak of divine glory, the voice from heaven,
Straight down into the messy reality of struggling faith, difficult healings in the valley,
along the road where they just can't grasp his talk about suffering.
and finally, inside a house, getting these challenging lessons on humility, who's really in the seriousness of sin and this call to inner purity and peace.
The contrasts are just immense throughout. Heavenly power versus human limits, worldly ambition versus humble service, belonging on the outside versus what's inside.
So, thinking about the key takeaways from Mark 9, what stands out?
Well, clearly the command to listen to him, focusing on Jesus' supreme authority. Then there's the reality of that struggle between faith and unbelief, like the Father showed us.
The importance of prayer, especially for this kind of spiritual struggle.
Definitely. And Jesus completely turning worldly ideas of greatness upside down. It's about service.
Plus that broader view of who belongs to him, beyond just the immediate group.
And finally, those really stark warnings about sin, both causing others to sin and dealing with it ruthlessly in our own lives.
Okay, so here's something to maybe chew on as we finish. Jesus gives those incredibly severe warnings about hell, unquenched fire, undying worms.
Yeah, really intense imagery.
And right after that, he says, everyone will be salted with fire, and then immediately commands, have salt in yourselves and be at peace with each other.
That connection is fascinating. Fire, salt, peace.
What might that juxtaposition, being salted with fire, having salt within, and achieving peace, suggest about maybe the purification or testing involved? And what kind of inner state, that saltiness or integrity, might be needed to endure trials and find that true peace Jesus calls for, especially right after those serious warnings?